Well, hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the webinar. I am super excited today to walk through our 90-day rebrand plan, how we did it and stayed almost sane. There is always a question of whether we were ever sane before, but that's a whole different topic that we'll explore on another webinar at a different point. Today, I'm super excited to have Justin Ahrens with us. He was our partner, our spirit guide, our Sherpa, our everything during this rebrand process. He is Chief Evangelist of Rule 29. He is the author and host of Design Of podcast. He is an expert, evidently, on collaborative Spotify playlists and was just schooling me on some of this beforehand, and I was learning some new things. And I'm just delighted to have him with him because he was a true partner through this process. Welcome, Justin. We are so delighted to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Russ. It's my honor to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dig into it. We've got a lot of content to get through and just super excited to walk people through this because a rebrand as a marketer, I've been through it a couple times. It's one of the hardest and one of the most rewarding things one can do. And I've never done one on a timeline like this before. So I was super excited. We're going to walk through kind of the challenge we faced and how we decided to rebrand, how we selected a partner to work with, how we chose to collaborate, the rules and tools we used, what we achieved, and the lessons learned, both the never forget to do this and the we never want to do this part of it again. So it's going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to sharing all the lessons. The challenge we faced as Lytho, or as In Motion now at the time I joined the company, was we are a company that powers the teams that power world-class brands. Some truly amazing companies trust us with workflow and digital asset management and brand guide software to help bring their brands to life. And yet, the reality that happens to a brand over time is what I sometimes call entropy, brand entropy. And that we started as, actually many years ago, and this logo is not here, we started as Proof It Online. We at a certain point became a product called In Motion. In order to have the right domain, we became In Motion Now, but the product was In Motion. We launched our SaaS product many years back, In Motion Ignite. Meanwhile, we merged with a Dutch company that had been called Sabern, that had a product called Brandifier, that had a few years back rebranded as Lytho. So the portfolio of brands, other than in most cases an affection for the color green, had relatively little in common, and even there were sort of organic brand extensions that had happened, which is also always a super cool thing, like our customer conference becoming In Momentum, but it was getting sort of out of hand, and with the two companies coming together, Lytho BV and In Motion Now, we needed an identity that reflected truly who we were, and we needed one on a very short timeline. But before I go further, I want to run a quick poll of the audience because we've obviously got a great group of marketers and creatives assembled for this today. And I want to know something very simple, which is, has anyone been through a rebrand before? So I'm going to launch this poll and we are going to see what people say. You should see the poll in front of you. And just go ahead and select one of the four options. Yes, I've been through a rebrand and I led it. Yes, I was part of the team that executed it. No, but I've been through one, but I was not on the execution team. Or I have not been through a rebrand before. So we are collecting responses and I am seeing them roll in. Curious to know your thought, Justin. If you think of a group of marketers that might assemble for an event like this, how many of them do you think have been through a rebrand before? What percentage?
Oh, I would go on the limb and say that they've probably been in the 70 to 80% range. I think, especially over the last, several years, as brands are trying to differentiate themselves more and more, that I'd be willing to bet that they've been a part of it at some level. I'm gonna go 80%.
80%, I think that's a fabulous guess, and let us see how close that guess is as I close the poll and share the results. Justin, Were you cheating?
No, I wasn't cheating. I did start
We've
70
got
to 80, but I went higher. Yeah.
That is amazing. And the reason, by the way, that I love doing polls like this in a webinar is we start to understand who the audience is so we can guide what we say towards them. So many people have been through it before, and the lion's share, 62%, have been part of the team that executed it. So that's a super cool thing for us to know as we move forward. So sort of the principles that we uncovered, the first one was you need to know your objective, and even more important, you need to know your customer.
Hey, Russ, before you go forward, can I just throw out one thing?
Do it.
About your slide earlier on, with all your different logos and that sort of thing. You know, what we are finding a lot in the market these days is again, because of the last couple of years, what's going on, there's been a lot of M&A activity, and or people are kind of shifting their focus a bit and, you know, really trying to either realign with a new service or audience, or just kind of freshen up their brand. So there's a lot of that going on. And I think one of the questions you asked me when we first started is, you know, do you see a lot of this? And and the reality is that the answer is yes. And we've seen a lot of it more the last couple of years because of these activities, to where, you know, an organization and them trying to, you know, for lack of better terms, you know, battle and stay in business and stay relevant and make connections. You know, there's been a lot of what we call a little bit like a brand creep, or, you know, a lot of, you know, sub-brand personalities that exist. And one of the things that we see a lot of that we're, you know, kind of working with our clients on is to refocus, right? And to really make sure that the brand is consistent and both internally and externally. So I just want to say that because one of the things I've really loved about you and your team is your realization of that. And I know we'll get to that a little bit later, but that's really what has helped this project.
That's good to hear. And I did feel less alone in my plight when you and I discussed that, Justin, as it were. And that actually sort of ties to the idea that, you know, a brand and a brand hierarchy has a purpose, it has a function, and that function is to get into the consumer's mind. So if I am Nike, I have hundreds, if not thousands, of models of sneakers, often with relatively unimaginative names like the 1100. They're each part of a series or family that might be called something like the Nike Torch. I just know that one because I happen to wear it. But even a company with the marketing muscle of Nike needs to concentrate that energy to get into the consumer's brain, or to be, as I often say, pointy, right? To be focused enough. And this gets to your point on focus, Justin. And so Nike chooses to put all their brand energy behind the top corporate brand of Nike. You don't have to do that. I mean, if you look at like Alphabet, which owns Google and other properties, they purposely keep that umbrella brand quite weak. And then the separate products, whether it be G Suite or Google, have the marketing muscle behind them. But you've got to decide where to focus your energy, per your point about focus.
100%.
I'm a real geek, I've got to warn you, and I will not spend more than 60 seconds on this slide for that reason. I will time myself. I'm a real geek on the concept of product and company naming, because there is a taxonomy here that I continue to evolve that I've stolen from many others. And I won't go into all of it, but a really popular one is an empty vessel type name that doesn't mean anything, like Kodak or Niantic. Probably the single most popular is an evocative name like Google or Toast or Rule 29 that evokes something about the brand. Tell us what Rule 29 is, Justin. I remember it being evocative and I don't remember what it evokes.
Well, it evokes a question, is what we want. We want people to ask us what Rule 29 means so we can share. So thank you for falling into my trap again, Russ. But really, it's for us to position our story of that we feel every organization has an opportunity to create their own rules, and our rules to make creative matter. So Rule 29 means to make creative matter for every organization and their unique rules.
Brilliant. So, and every good name, you know, has therefore a story behind it, right? And there are many different types, as we see here. And we thought a lot about, do we want empty vessel, evocative? Should it be a portmanteau, which has been what I've done in my past couple of companies? But we were lucky, especially given our timeline, we had a cheat code. And the cheat code was one of the two companies that we had merged was named Lytho, which initially I thought was empty vessel, 5 letters, domain was available, cool. There's more to it than that. The word litho in the naming work that had been done prior came from lithography. Lithography is a process of creating prints. It's a very old process using oil, stone, and water to enable one-to-many publication. And when you think about what Lytho does, whether it is on the workflow side, helping teams create content, or whether it is on the digital asset management side, helping teams distribute, manage content, and get that one-to-many content to their stakeholders, that's kind of what we do. And we considered other options, we really did. And we talked with Justin about, if we launch a name search, how long might it take? And the true answer is it can take a long time, and the name Lytho is not perfect. No name is perfect. I was talking with a team member the other day about how can we get people to stop saying Lytho? And the answer is it's actually going to be hard, and we're just going to have to say Lytho, Lytho, Lytho till they get it. But it was a name that worked well for us.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things here to share transparently is we also, at the time, we had a time crunch, right? We had a date that we collectively, and I know we'll talk about this here in a minute, that we needed to go for. And I love the fact that you guys looked at the equity that you had in your atmosphere and were like, you know what, this is going to work really well. Because I know one of our original conversations is we talked about, you know, can we do a name search and a name within the timeline? And I'm like, I'm not sure we can do that. So I love that this was present, and then you grasped the heritage of it.
It happened to work, and that is actually one of the lessons for if you're trying to move fast on a rebrand is be opportunistic. When you are handed a gift like that, take that gift and run with it. So, so that's one important principle, is be opportunistic. Another one is to manage scope. And this is a model that, I learned from a good project manager many years ago, and I continue to use. It's the project management triad. With any major project, such as a rebrand, there are 3 elements. Quality has to be there. You've got to do good work, or you shouldn't even get out of bed, frankly. But in order to do that good work, there are 3 elements. There is cost, scope, and time. And to an extent, any of those legs of the triad can be compressed. If you find yourself saying, we have no time and we need to get this done, well, you can always throw money at the problem and increase cost, right? Or you can always reduce scope, as we did, and say, name change, not in scope, or name change in scope, but we will use an existing asset, rather, I should have said. So this principle, anytime you are sitting down and saying, I face an insolvable problem, I don't have enough budget, or I don't have enough time, ask yourself, look at this triad and go, which of these legs can you compress and how? And it's always going to be at the cost of one of the others. It will always be, we can decrease the timeline by spending more, but this is a super good principle just to apply. Cost, scope, time. And I think pick any 2 and solve for the other.
Yeah, and I think what's really key here is that you can't do all 3. People think you can do all 3, but what I love about this, and again, we've talked about this at the beginning, is, of these items, and this is was a great part of your leadership, Russ, is, here's all the things that we need to do, right? And it seemed insurmountable at the time, but then this formula really served us well going forward.
It's just about being realistic, and I love that you were able to bond with us on using these principles to move forward. After that, and this is why we were so delighted to run into Rule 29, and I don't want this to turn into a love fest, but it truly has been a great partnership. You've got to find your right partner to bring the brand to life once you establish the scope, once you establish your timeline, once you establish your budget. And an intriguing thing, at least from my perspective, and I want to hear yours as well, Justin, mine is I always start with, can this partner, can this agency understand my customer? If I explain my business to them, do they lean in and ask questions, or do they lean back and stare blankly and say, call me when you get to the colors and fonts? Can they execute on the budget we have? Not every agency is scrappy enough. Not every agency is, targeted at your type of business, right? So you've got to find a close fit, a close alignment there. I said scrappy because, as people who know me know, I really, really do value scrappy. And then most importantly for me, are the vision and culture aligned? And we're embarking on a really tough journey together. Can we get along with each other at our best and at our worst? Because in going through the rebrand, you will see the best and the worst in both yourself and your partner. But how does that compare from your perspective, Justin, in terms of the criteria that you look for as you select a customer?
Yeah, I think the list here that we have is really fantastic. And I think, to that first bullet, do they know what they want from the project? That is valuable, as is, do they understand the impact of a brand strategy, brand messaging in their business? We are not in a space where we want to educate people on the value of brand. I mean, we do that all the way through, but if you have zero understanding, you just want to get something done for whatever reason, that tends to be a bad alignment for us. So do they know what they want from the project, and do they value, brand in general for their business as a business opportunity, right? Both internally and externally. And then, of course, budget expectations, we absolutely want those to be realistic. And again, to your point, going back to the graph, we can do some things there, right, to make that work. But really, the third bullet is one that is really valuable to us, and that is, can we as organizations, work well together, right? Do we have cultural alignment? Do we each understand the visions that we can, bring to the project? And then, and if that's the case, then the last bullet, it typically happens, right? Where, we can get along with each other. I think one of the things that happens in any brand project, and, we have a scenario like this going on right now. We're working with the company, we love them. I think they really appreciate us. And there was just some miscommunication, right? Or some assumptions that happens. But I believe that we, believe in each other enough that we can work through that, right? We're on the same team. And that's one thing that one of the many things I appreciated about your team is, each of us at times either miscommunicated or made a mistake or we communicated in a way that wasn't how we meant it to be, but we were able to come together and talk that through and figure out a way forward. And I think that's really important, because brand project in general can be stressful. There's a lot of things on stake. Like, we realize it's a huge investment for you as an organization. Like, we take that really seriously. We're a part of your team there. We feel that investment. At the same time, we also realize it's a big deal for you, your job, your standing in the organization, the success of the organization, right? There's lots of levels of real serious, responsibility there. And we understand that. And so we want to make sure that we have communication and alignment so we can talk through those things. And when that happens, that is when things really, really work well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There's got to be that alignment. Now, we need to align, but we also need to collaborate, and that sort of requires rules and tools. Again, speaking of cheat codes, we were fortunate in that is fundamentally what we do as a business. We create tools that enable brand marketers and creative teams to collaborate. I mean, that helped us with the tools, but you still need the rules, right? And, one of the most important things for me about the whole process was the ability to engage in constructive conflict and healthy collaboration throughout. And I noticed that your team was particularly gifted at that. How do you go about building a culture where people are good at that, Justin?
That's a great question. It's really that is modeling it, but also outlining expectations. I think one of the things I say to my team is, we're not going to be perfect, right? We're going to make some mistakes. Let's own it. Let's just have a transparent conversation and let's just own it. Because, like I said, we're a part of your organization success. And so we take that seriously. And we're not perfect. We're really good at what we do, but, everyone makes mistakes. And, I'm kind of talking about the mistake side, but also on the flip side, really want to make sure that if you believe in something, or you have something to provide or add to a project, speak up. Like, that's what you're paying us for, is to have that. And so, it's really encouraging clear communication and making sure that at least everyone in my team feels supported and they have that space. I think that's one thing I saw you model well, Russ, on your team is, at our meetings, you would go around and ask everyone for their opinion on, where it was appropriate. And that was really powerful, because that also encouraged my team to speak up, right? Because, not all of our clients we work with necessarily want that. And so we work hard to get that. So I think it's both modeling it, making sure that your team feels supported, and then having quick little debriefs or check-ins throughout the project, be like, and that's really coaching opportunities too, and also learning opportunities for me. I might say, hey, I think you should do this, and then someone would say, oh, you weren't on this meeting, and this and this happened. I'm like, oh, good, I'm glad we talked about that. So it's really being open both ways.
Absolutely. And, a piece of that, I've worked with agency partners in different areas, whether creative, development agencies, PR, and the partners that I've always worked best with have always been the ones that were willing to push back and say, you might be wrong, you might not be seeing the whole picture, let's talk about it. And in order to make that happen, you've got to create that environment. You've got to make it safe for people to say, whether it is the most junior developer on the team or the most senior person, to say, I'm not sure this works for me, and here's why, which sometimes leads to fun conversations. We had one legendary blow up about how do we really feel about this purple color versus the blue color, and it was just awesome. But the nice thing is that led to a better outcome, as I think we'll see when we get to the deliverables. So those things that's why it's constructive conflict. A good thing comes out of it.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't agree more.
And one of the things that I, have always noticed about it, but in this process, it became really clear, is how many functional areas in our business were touched and that your team had to interact with. So obviously the brand team, I'm looking here in Lytho workflow at just some screenshots of little pieces of projects to get a sense of the teams that were involved. Obviously the branding team had a number of projects, right? Whether it be the brand identity, assorted projects for the deliverables, etc. The web team, of course, had assorted projects with many, many tasks under them and many people associated with each. Operations team, hey, you're going to need to change your billing systems. You're going to need to change things you did not think about being part of your brand. You're going to have PR and communications team involved. You're going to have, sort of your content team involved. So throughout the organization, I noticed that we had just a massive number of teams, all of whom at least touched a piece of it. And we saw this in the poll earlier, where yes, a number of people had been through the rebrand on the team that executed, but other people had been on teams that assisted or were part of that journey. And then timelines, let's talk again about the Triad. Yes, I said we did this in 90 days, and we did, and I'm proud of it. And there is still a certain amount of, I wouldn't call it broken glass being swept up, but things that we knew wouldn't be within scope for that timeline. So we had a separate project, a separate campaign for the post-launch, and there are still things here that are being done. That's not, we're not just shifting out things that, just throwing them out as out of scope, but things like transitioning the social accounts to get all the followers possible migrated from 2 sets of accounts down to 1. All of those things take time. And so you need to, as you plan, be aware there's not one project, there's several. And yes, there's the big brand launch, but then there's all of the work post-launch that becomes a piece of it.
Yeah, and I would say, Russ, too, I think one of the things that, and again, this slide is speaking into it. Oftentimes we'll work with clients that want to do everything at once, right? And then when you lay this out and they see, and then they become overwhelmed, right? And that it makes sense, because doing all the things that you did, especially redoing your brand, your name, and everything, from your email signature to the signage on the building to the shirts you wear, it touches everything. But I think what's really healthy, and this is part of one of the things that we try to coach our team on, but you guys were aware of this, which is really great, which is this can happen over time and it's okay. And we started with the most pressing engagement points, right? Where you're customers spend the most time and where you spend the most time in marketing and sales. And that's just a really good, it's an obvious area to start, I suppose, but you would be surprised. And then building out from there. So I think what's exciting also from an organizational standpoint, this gives you opportunities to continue to tap people on the shoulder that you are here, you're evolved, you're new here, think these things are still present, these new things are here. It's actually an advantage, we think, to think through, reintroducing your brand over a period of time.
Couldn't agree more. And there's just that whole, I call it the light switch, the moment when the brand changes, and you've got to be aware of what's visible to people and what's not. And even for the things that are going to take time to transition, like the socials, you may then create the logo that is Lytho, formerly In Motion now, so that people are anchored when that change happens, but it still happens at one time for all the visible touch points, and then the less visible ones happen over time. And it touches tons of people. I mean, I counted, we are a company of 108 people now, I believe. We had some 70 people tagged as on at least one task as part of this project. So it takes a village, and there's a huge number of heroes, whether it's Brittany Pace, who stepped into project manage the whole thing because she's extraordinary there, whether it is Chris Trousey, COO, who shouldered a tremendous load of all the operational duties. I mean, people across the company stepped in to lift and carry, and I was frankly humbled at how much they were willing to step up and help.
Yeah, it was awesome. From our end, by the way, we haven't been able to talk about this. It was inspiring from us to see an organization believe in the rebrand of what you're doing and have everyone pitch in. It was really spectacular.
It was super fun. Well, I have noticed a couple of things. I will look at SurveyMonkey that rebranded Momentive. I'm looking at another company that recently rebranded. I can't remember their name, but I noticed there is a trend where CMOs rebrand and then take new jobs. And I think that speaks to the stress of the endeavor, and the fact that we had a team that was so receptive made it not that way at all, which was extraordinary, because you may notice I'm still in the seat.
Thank goodness.
And, we talked a little bit about this, but the concept of, sort of open, honest, fearless conflict to get all ideas on the table, I would love to. One of the things that really blew my mind that your team did as you walked in was lay out a thoughtful framework for getting past that by working to identify who we are as a brand. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the kind of tools in our toolbox, so to speak, from a brand standpoint, is there's a variety of different, research, brand alignment sessions, story messaging development that we can do. And for you all, since you had a lot of different, shall I say, like different offices or different, groups coming together with the acquisition and everything else, one of the things that we felt really strong on in our timeline is we need to bring everyone together to really talk about how you envision yourself, not so much now, but in the future, right? Because we're building a brand for the future. And this process that we took, we had all the key stakeholders from around the world, right, on this session. And we wanted to walk you through, and really some of the secret sauce. This is to start preparing you for what's coming ahead, right? Which is you're going to shift. And the dreams can happen. And the great thing, one of the things I love about what I do is a brand can shift an organization negatively, but done right, really positively, and set it up for the future. And the key to that is having everyone on board and open to change. And so this session was really to come in and get everyone's input about how you pictured the future organization. And then that gives us a lot of groundwork and things to use to help you imagine and see the future Lytho, right? And so that leans into our story messaging. So our story messaging process is built off gathering information, getting research, and it's sort of a hybrid, story messaging brand strategy, right? It's to bring all those things together to be some of the foundational elements of your brand. And so we needed to start there by really kind of just pulling back the curtain and digging into what made you guys you, what was your purpose, why do you do this, where are you going, who are you serving, how are you doing it, and what makes you different. And those are some of the core elements to brand creation.
And one of the interesting things that really emerged for me and the team on it was to choose an identity here is to choose what you are not, because it's very tempting to look at all of these identities. We are magicians who are also sages, but we're kind of a regular guy, and we're the hero, by the way, but we're creators, and also we're the lover and the ruler and the rebel. It's like, no, you don't choose arbitrarily. You actually enter this maybe with a preconception about who you are, and you emerge with a far greater understanding. And
Right.
we emerged, frankly, as we looked at all of them, there were hits on various quadrants, but we emerged with, because of the complexity that we solve for clients with the magician as an identity, because it does fit sort of what we do. And that actually fed into many of the brand elements that we'll look at in a moment.
Yeah, and I think, it's funny, I just did a session before this call, and one of the things that we had to keep going over is people tried to pick multiple, right?
Yeah.
And that's, you really identified what the big point of that exercise is no, let's hone down to really who you really uniquely are and are going to be and live into the future on. So we had some great conversations. That was really spectacular. But I think it also opens up people to think about the brand in a much more not only focused but larger perspective.
Absolutely. And this is where we started from a word mark perspective. We're going to start looking now at some of the deliverables that with Justin's team we developed. This was the original Lytho word mark, which is, it's strong. It has a lot of good elements. If you were to look at this and say the one or two glaring weaknesses, what would they be to your eye, Justin?
Well, I mean, I think for us, it was the image that was, kind of inside the letter forms. It maybe weakened it a little bit. We really love brands that have some story within them, or some little hidden gems within them, or again, to your point before of the different types of names you can have different types of logos too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to have a word type logo, it should be bold in our opinion, and simple in concept. And for the technology, having lowercase in a lot of ways makes sense. It feels more approachable and friendly. So that was all working. But I think really it was, we felt it could be uniquer, right? For a lack of better terms, I'll just use that word, but and then also more solid. And I think that, the image inside of it heard it, and it seemed like it could have more personality.
And so we did this, which, by the way, was a ton of iterations. You would not believe the number of iterations on the precise thickness of the lines and such. But walk me through why, I know what I believe, but walk me through why this is a good logo from your perspective. Obviously, I think it is.
Yeah, well, what was interesting about this, going from what you just showed us to here, is there was also some equity in what you had in that other mark and some of your different markets. And so the challenge, which we thought was, we love these kind of challenges, is what can we take from the brand equity of the original mark, right? And then how can we bring it into a new mark and really build things within it as much as possible that can then be used in other brand elements. And so for here, what we wanted to do is we wanted to be something that had a better flow to it. We wanted to capitalize the L, but still make it friendly. We wanted to point back into, the YTH. We have some hidden little gems in the logo that kind of are inspired somewhat by InMotion, but also the heritage of, what Lytho stands for, right? And so that's everything from, ink dots, right, to almost like direction markers, because what you do is you help your clients have clarity and ease in process. And so this all are things that inspired us in making this mark, right? There's a flow here, and there's 2 points that come together. And as you'll see in a moment, we kind of took that and expanded on it throughout the rest of the brand.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love the infinity loop implied here, and then the 2 ink drops, which then became the ink drops between the loops of the Y and the H. which became signature elements that we used elsewhere. And
Yeah. So,
go for it.
ahead. Yeah. So I think what we were highlighted is we feel from a brand perspective that everything should have a meaning or a use and a purpose, right? And there's exceptions to that rule, but as we developed different graphical elements and shapes that would work, what I really appreciated is we'd share with you, why the infinity symbol was there as your avatar, right? Why the ink drops could both work as ink drops and echoes back to the logo, but also direction markers and kind of points of being. The circles worked as confetti, but also symbolized starting points, ending points, holistic approach. I mean, there's lots of different meanings we had with this. And what I really enjoyed is that your internal team, I think one thing that we should highlight, by the way, that we didn't, is you have an internal creative team as well.
Yes, we do.
So we were able to collaborate with them, and more times than not, that works out wonderfully, but it doesn't always work out wonderfully. And I think what was really awesome about this process, and Russ, this is something I think that you did in the beginning, which was great, is everyone that had a stakeholder or stake in this brand was a part of it, right? And it was awesome to make sure that the design team was there. And we riffed on things together, right? We worked on things. I mean, even this presentation, your team put together and then gave us an opportunity to give feedback on. Like, that is really, that's what, great, collaboration and partnerships are part of. But even this, we would get suggestions on color and shapes and everything else, and then even challenges of how are you going to use this. And that was really great because it came from a place of, hey, I'm going to be the one using this, right? How can I do this on certain things? And so we made sure everything that we did was explained and shaped in a way that wasn't our opinion, right? I mean, it was our recommendation, but also was built in a real world setting to where you guys could execute on it.
And a piece of that is knowing that the in-house team will be the team executing on it. It is in an effort like this super important to involve them, simply because I have been in situations where the in-house team has handed the brand book from the agency. Here is what you will do. And it was so much fun to see the back and forth and collaboration. I just loved it.
Yeah, me too.
And stellar work on the color palette. I was literally just telling my CEO he needs to watch HBO Max because I've become obsessed with Peacemaker. But other than that, one of the intriguing things about the blend of the blue and the purple here, the deep violet and the and the lilac, is that it does feel a little bit like HBO Max branding, and it's a premium brand. And that actually something that your team educated us on and did well on was putting our competitors' logos on a color spectrum to understand where there was space to breathe and room to move there, because you want to ideally both fit in and stand out. If your brand is a trade show booth, you don't want to look exactly like all the others, but you also don't want to look totally out of place.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think another thing to highlight too is one of the stakeholders on this was actually your team that developed your platform, right?
Right.
And so the colors of the brand couldn't just be front-facing marketing colors, right? They needed to be able to work throughout the enterprise. And so as these continue to expand and evolve, right? So we talked about what do these colors feel? Do they help share the way that we want people to feel the brand, right? Do we help lead them in a direction ideally we want them to go? And then also, are these other colors usable in a variety of marketing interactions and also obviously digital interactions? And so I think we had probably our I won't say heated, but probably our most debated conversations over color, right? And that was great. And from our perspective, we never took that personally. We just knew how much it meant and how important it was, and all the levels the colors were, right? And I think there was even a point you and I had a conversation where I was like, listen, we need to get these main colors right, and we can add others as we go. But, and again, you and I use that triangle a lot, I think, when we were trying to get things, going, but also thinking about it from a long-term vision standpoint. So That's the one I remember being the one that went around the most. Is that how you remember it?
I do indeed, but I think we did reach a good place of recognizing we are coming to the next starting place. There will, of course, be evolution, but what has to be foundationally right for it to be a solid starting place to build on?
Yeah, and colors are one of those things too where they're incredibly important. Every one of these things are a step, right? The name, the mark, the brand characteristics, right? Color, imagery, font, etc. And they're all incredibly important. And so it was great that we're able to work through that with you.
Well, the next piece is you have to think about it all in terms of use cases, which is where the brand guide, and we have this now in a brand guide in Lytho, of course, came to mind in terms of really spelling out, here is how the logo can be used, here is the anatomy, here are the various pieces of it, and how the various graphic elements are used in an extraordinary amount of detail in documenting what's right and what's wrong in terms of usages.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was great about this document is, often when we do the story messaging stage, that's really foundational, and people can always visualize how that's going to work out in the brand. And what's great about the brand guide is then you really can start seeing it living, right? And a lot of the terminology and words used here are from that session that we did from the very beginning. And so to put this all together, because this is, primarily an internal document. And so we want to make sure that it's not just, technical information, but it really shares a story of the brand and why it's important and what you want people to feel and know about it. So they can, it's a guide, right? So they can help live it out, whatever their job is, whether it's in writing or visual or selling or whatever. So yeah, that was a great project to do with your team as well.
That was super fun, and it is awesome to put it in the software so that people can actually access it and that it can be kept updated. And you did a really good job in illustrating some of the use cases here in terms of apparel, swag, because in my mind, it has to work on something as big as a billboard and something as small as, a fab icon or whatnot. So I was just super delighted with how it worked out for apparel, so much that I'm wearing it, right?
I love it. Well, I think one of the exciting parts, this is like when people think about branding, I think this is the stage they're thinking about. Like, I want to see the brand on things, right? Whether it's a water bottle, a truck, or a billboard, or website, or whatever else. And these are one of those things to help visualize the different ways, kind of the use case elements of the brand, right? So your team can build off this. And then we can also highlight how, the guide itself and the suggestions we have actually could work in a variety of different ways.
And, it's also necessary to socialize it with stakeholders because most people need to see it in action before they can really understand how they feel. So I thought, being able to visualize like this, and the subtle differences, the fact that on the business cards, we have a rainbow foil there because opportunistically that becomes something that's available in that format. I just love the ability to bring elements like that in and yet still stay true to the color palette and the brand philosophy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is one of those things where we had an idea that we felt was still within the strategy and overall feel of the brand, but also could make this particular interaction feel really special, especially when you're at conferences and that sort of thing, when we're able to get back in person here, hopefully soon. And what I loved is that you guys were open to that conversation. And I think that's because of the steps we took along the way. These are the kind of little small areas where a brand can expand and flex its muscles a little bit and have some fun.
Absolutely. I want to jump into another poll real quick. So let me pull this one up. And I am curious to know, if you are, pardon my Outlook reminders here, y'all. Curious to know if you are charged with maintaining brand consistency, how well do you feel equipped by your organization to maintain brand consistency? And the poll's live now. Feel free to just sort of click whichever option reflects your experience. Do you feel you're well equipped to maintain brand consistency from a tools and rules perspective? Are you somewhat equipped? Do you struggle at times? Many of us do. I know that I have at times. Or do you feel like you need processes and tools for sure to help maintain consistency? So I'm just curious to know what people have to say here. And this is an area where, Justin, I know all brand marketers struggle, but frankly, depending on business model, some struggle more than others.
Yeah, and I think that I think this is changing, right? I think people our organizations are understanding the power of brand more and more and more, but we still see, even for organizations you wouldn't expect, just not having enough for their team to consistently maintain their brand, or they're just overworked, right? There's just too many things going on. And so that's where an agency can come in and really, kind of extend that capability and help organizations figure that out.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And it's pretty much a spectrum. Most people feel like they have something, but there's a wide spectrum between well-equipped and struggling. I would say that, a piece of this, is the right partners, the right guidance. A piece of it is the right tools in terms of software to maintain a brand guide and keep it updated, become things that become arguably, at least in my case, very important.
I thought those little audience polls, you're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you. I'm just always curious to know what people think. So here's where we started. And this was a fine site and a fine brand identity that we needed to move forward from. And here is where we have ended up, understanding that we are the teams that power that we do power the teams that power the brands. Any commentary as you look at this? Any regrets when you look at where we came down, Justin?
Ooh, no, I don't have any regrets. What I've really enjoyed here between the two, kind of evolving, is that I feel with the richness of this brand and color spectrum, but also the work on story and messaging, and you guys even understanding more where you wanted to go and the value of it, this whole experience just in this little spot, establishes who you are and has clear call to action and customer journeys here. So no, I love it. I love the simplicity of it, and also the richness of it.
It gave us a solid place to start from, which is always what you need. I'm going to take a moment and click in here, and you should be seeing, if I am correct, you should be seeing our brand guide built in Lytho. You can see that it contains the content that we discussed in terms of the work with Justin's team, our North Star, team values. But if you scroll down, it starts to become, something that is useful on a daily basis, whether it is, here is where you go to download logos to understand guidance, whether it becomes, here is where you go to understand which files to use to get your color specs. Let's say that you're building a landing page or something, to understand and how those colors should be used, which to me is always what percentage of everything becomes something that I become very, very focused on sometimes. I know it seems a little obsessive, but these things do matter. Fonts, etc., guidance for use in swag, etc., guidance for photography, which I love where we came down with using full color photography very rarely and using the color overlays to make it distinctive. I just thought that really gave it a strong, Lytho feel. But at the same time, this gives you something you can share with your, agencies or other teams to keep them on brand, and then very, very utilitarian stuff, such as here's where you go to download your PowerPoint template, add your Zoom or LinkedIn background, etc. So it was just phenomenal to be able to bring this to life with the right software and the right guidance to bring it all together. I learned a lot through this, and the 5 things that I didn't think of, I didn't really think about the fact that everybody plays a role in the way that it did here. I didn't think about the fact that it really needs to align with product. I have often forgotten that, and this project really reminded me of it. Didn't think about the fact that it was a ton of projects, not just one, and needed strong project management. The fact that naming is a hierarchy is something that a lot of marketers miss. They choose a name that seems appealing without thinking about how it plays. And then my favorite lesson from this one was, does finance know? Because I think I still owe a couple of bottles of wine to our CFO based on customers that said, who is this new entity that I'm getting an invoice from? I've never heard of Lytho. So those were my sort of 5 top lessons. I don't know if there are ones that jumped out at you, Justin, as you've been through this process many times before.
Yeah, I think again, and this, I'm not just saying this because we're on this together. I think what really highlighted this project to me and my team, and we talked about this, is the value of having a great client partner
Mm-hmm.
and having a great connection, right, and communication. And I think that, from the times where, there are conversations that happen that, right, your team was stressed and our team was stressed because we were, our deadline was fast approaching. It didn't look like we were going to get there on some things at sometimes, right? But we're able to work it through. And I think it makes it so much more, I think enjoyable, but also it feels triumphant when you're able to do that for organizations that you really align with and you're in it together, right? So I think for me, it's you never think about at times the mix or the combination of the two organizations until times get tough. So everything else you have here I think is brilliant.
Cool. And Gina, I do owe you those bottles of wine. We have Justin, you and I predicted, and this is based on the sink-in values and how we work together, that we might run a little long. We are a little bit famous for that because you and I both love to talk and love to spur each other on with thoughts. But I do want to just toss up a couple questions, if I may. This is a really good one from Nicole Elmer. Any tips on promoting a rebrand to an internal staff resistant to change? I've been seeing my staff hang out onto our old brand mostly out of, sort of comfort, right? It's their comfort zone. Justin, do you have thoughts on how you help a team, internal teams, get past that I am used to the old brand because it's what I know?
Yeah, I think part of it is making a use case for those individuals in the areas that matter to them. So for example, we've coached our clients before to do like an internal audit of competition, right? And showing how, that maybe you look similar or outdated or, maybe not even in the right atmosphere as an organization to show, hey, here's who we're competing against. We have an opportunity here to really own something. Or do personas, right? And talk about, here's who we've been marketing to, but, here's our biggest growth opportunity. And it could be as simple as just showing, we've had a client do this before, where they've printed out all of the materials that they've done, HTMLs, mailing pieces, digital assets, and you put it up there and it doesn't look like the same organization. Mm-hmm. So, and you do it in a way that's not like, haha, we need to do this. It's more of like, hey, this is a concern here. We have an opportunity as a business to really help clarify and grow, and a brand is a part of it. It's actually a business strategy for us. So those are a couple of the ways that we've seen people do that.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on that. And a piece of it, to me, a brand is a functional asset. At the end of the day, I'm very focused around the objective, the business objective of it. And so a piece of it is walking people through that, just as you said. And a piece of it then for me has always been about explaining the rationale, walking through, here's why we made this change, here's why it's necessary, here's what this means. I find that typically when people resist things, what is behind resistance is often a question, and you've got to hear the questions and work through it. So, and one other question very briefly. This is a really good one from Jeremy. Did any members of the team feel that the new brand was a step backwards? And if so, did those feelings change post-implementation now that it's been lived in for a bit? I mean, it's about the Lytho team, so I'll speak to it, but I also want Justin's take real quickly. We were having a conversation with our CEO this week about living in the comfort zone and outside of the comfort zone. Most learning and growth happens outside of the comfort zone. So again, the old brand is a comfort zone for people. and you need to give them time and space to get into the new brand. You need to walk through, because yes, I'm going to answer the question directly, Jeremy. Yes, I did have team members, say, gee, this feels like it's farther back from where we wanted to go. We had these great line extensions within Momentum with a hashtag InMoLove, other things. We're losing a lot. We're giving that up. And, my guidance to those team members was, first off, here's the rationale, but let's live with it a while and see how we feel. And frankly, the more that you get swag on people, the more that you get swag in people's hands, the more they get comfortable with it over time, the more they adopt it. And I think you just have to give people time, space, and rationale. Justin, I don't know if you have takes beyond that.
Yeah, really, it's. I think to sum up what you're saying, we feel this in almost every brand project is a lot of people just aren't comfortable with change, and even if what you provide for them, you could quote unquote prove is better. Some people just won't like it right away because they don't like change. One quick example: we had a client that everyone loved this brand that we did for them. There's this one guy, he was a higher up, and every meeting he would just hammer us and just talk about like he loved the old brand. Blah, 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 blah. A year later at their conference, he comes over to me and I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm gonna get lambasted again. And he put his hand and goes, I owe you an apology. And I'm like, about what? He's like, I love our brand. It just took me a bit. And I'm thinking it took you a year, but okay, great, we'll take it. And so again, but he just, as I've got to know him better, he just does not like change. And so we know going into it that we need to, kind of approach it differently. But yeah, I feel, of course, I'm biased. I think it was a great, bringing together of organizations and a brand that has a lot of potential and growth. So I'm extremely happy with it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Justin. You've been very generous with your time and insight. I would like to thank people for showing up and listening. This has been phenomenal. We do have the socials for both Lytho and Rule 29 up there for you. Feel free to follow us, engage with us. If you want to engage, one-to-one, I'm russ.summers@lytho.com. So feel free to shoot me an email or connect me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to talk with you about anything I might be able to help you with. I'd like to thank everybody once again. Justin, and again, thank you so much for all your time and assistance.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Laters, everybody.